Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Wolves Fancast series Stories from the Pack. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by BBC journalist and presenter Sean Farrington. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No trouble at all. Thanks for coming on board. Just before we spoke at time of recording, one thing I didn't mention in the introduction as well, you've recently, is it recent podcast? I just had a quick look that you've launched, Your Work, Your Money.
Very recent.
Yeah.
It literally just weeks old. There's a 5 Live program that's a bit of a podcast that I've worked on for a few years called Wake Up to Money anyway, and I do a bit of TV reporting, but this money is podcast only. Getting down with the kids.
So how did that come about? I guess it tied in with the work that you do with 5 Live, and did you feel there was more opportunity to expand on what you do in that role? And
yeah, I think just really we've been inundated with the coronavirus stuff going on, with questions about jobs, money, and all that kind of stuff, and we just weren't able to answer enough in our normal programs that we do. So we just thought, let's make a podcast just about that.
Brilliant. So I'll mention it, and when we put this out, we'll also put a little tag out there as well. But it's Your Work, Your Money. If you want to find it online on all the available podcast places, you'll find ourselves as well. So if that's of interest to you, then get involved and have a listen. We're talking Wolves, and on this series, if you haven't listened before, to people listening to the first time, really it's a trip down memory lane. We'll talk about the present, I'm sure, because it's bloody good at the moment, so we can't help do that. But I think what we have to do is really kind of talk about, and I think with a club like ourselves, it's a hell of a roller coaster as it's been. So the highs and the lows, and really your first memories as well. So we'll start as we always do at the beginning. So for yourself, Sean, what were your first memories of being a Wolves fan, be it sort of from home or the match experience? When did your Wolves story begin?
Well, my Wolves story probably began like way before I was born. My family for decades have been going to Molineux. My mum's uncle was like, near enough, not far off 100 years ago now, was like a shareholder in Wolves at one point.
Wow.
So the family ties to just, not in any kind of fancy way, just to Wolves have gone back right the way through. So as anybody who knows me has seen me at the match over the years, or my mates will know, I go to the match with my mom. That's who I go to the game with, and she's been going with her brothers since probably the early 60s, mid 60s, and then that's just followed it through ever since. So it was definitely one of those upbringings where you never even considered another team. Annoyingly, I just missed out on the live memories of the Sherpa Van Trophy final. Probably my first actual memories of Wolves is watching that game on VHS, because we had a copy of it and watched it on loop. And then for myself, the first match I went to was Oldham at home in August of 1990. Had John Island stand, J9, where I then was for pretty much all of the 90s. Had the honour of seeing Steve Bull score 2 goals in the first game I went to, but annoyingly, Ian Marshall scored 3 goals for Oldham, and we lost 3-2.
Was he the ponytail guy? I'm thinking that name rings a bell. Ian Marshall.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely at that point was more big mullet than the ponytail.
That's right. That's the one. Yes.
Surprisingly, scored some decent goals as well, isn't it, for the type of player? But yeah, that was it, and it's just crazy now. You talk about how good it is now, but actually, like when I was trying to remember before we started talking about this, what it was like, and I can just remember to my left a decrepit South Bank and an even more rundown like Waterloo Road stand, and I was pretty lucky really, because within a couple of years there were new stands popping up at Molineux, and And because I was always in the John Island, I got to see them all. I was never actually in them, but I got to see them all.
Brilliant. I mean, it's similar sort of to myself, really. One of my first games was in that lower tier in the John Island, in the sort of the red seats as it was, and that it was kind of like the family enclosure of the time, wasn't it? Until the Billy Wright was built, and I had a season ticket, sort of your equivalent the other way, I think, in J2, if serves me well. But do you still watch the games from there?
No, it's so in the. I think it was around the turn of the century, and an opportunity came up to move our season tickets. Me and my mum moved our season tickets. That people she knew that she'd been going to the match with for donkeys. They had a seat come up in the South Bank, and so sort of the classic row KK, pretty just over halfway up, just to the Billy Wright side behind the goal. Amazing seats.
Yeah.
And so we moved there, and pretty much ever since we've had season tickets there. There were a few years when I was at uni and I sort of foolishly gave up my season ticket because I thought I'm not going to be able to go, and I still ended up going to every game, travelling across the country to go. And it took me, we got into the Premier League around that time as well. So that was quite a nervous time. Managed to get to the Millennium Stadium, and all of that was down to a couple of fellas who sadly aren't with us now. Alan and Pete Elwell were the ones that brought us over to the South Bank. I had Pete's ticket when he couldn't go for a period of time. And Alan been a friend of the family for decades and decades. And and I never forget the Millennium Stadium. I had an exam the next morning that didn't go well at all after travelling to Cardiff, and and so then I managed to get that seat back about. Actually, it was when we got relegated to League One. I then my old seat, 2 seats away from my mum, came back available again. So got that then. Whether it was the League One season or the season after, can't quite remember. But it was around that time I managed to get that back. It was before Nuno anyway. I'm always at pains to say I jumped back on board the season ticket bandwagon before Nuno arrived. And so or still South Bank to this day, still got season ticket there now. Well,
brilliant.
Feels like a different era.
Yeah, no, I mean, and in those early days, you mentioned, classic story. I think many for a generation of, probably your first game and Bully scoring. It kind of was that was what it was, wasn't it? Every Saturday, it felt like was Bully was one of the main players you looked for, or was there any other players during that time that stood out for you?
It's funny, isn't it? You almost you want there to be other players. You sort of want to look back and think there were other heroes, but you can't get away from the fact that it's such a cliche, isn't it? Wolves fan, Wolverhampton, watching them through the 80s and 90s. It's like, Bully, how great was he? And you almost forget, really, how great he was. Like I did have every wall of my room was Bully posters. I remember Robbie Dennison and Paul Cook were more my type of player, I would say. Who are you going to be out on the playground? I was never quite the build or the strength or the finishing prowess of Bully. So those were the slightly softer touch I remember at the time. But for me, like the first hero I felt like was my hero I'll never forget watching the highlights, because it was an away game, Robbie Keane's first game of the season, when he made his debut against Norwich and scored a couple of goals. And I remember thinking, blimey, that he looks pretty good. Where's that come from? And then that season and the next, just seeing him, it felt like, I remember thinking, this is like my Bully, somebody who's come along in my area. It took a bit of time waiting for it, but I think Keno was definitely, I remember, going away on a Tuesday night to see Wolves play Bury, and Robbie Keane, just Wolves fans singing his name as a fairly, I think he must have been 17, 18 at that point. And you are just really like idolising him, somebody you can actually sort of empathise with a bit. It was, only like a few years older, and he'd be the one for me in the 90s. Let's be honest, there weren't that many sort of heroes to sort of take home, were there? There were a lot of players we thought, when Steve Corica joined, you thought, wow, is this going to be the one? Simon Osborne for a bit, and then, but too many games, you get a bit frustrated with him. But Robbie Keane, Dougie Freedman would be another one I'd put in that era of, again, more my kind of player. Somebody who liked to nutmeg rather than volleying a ball in the top corner style.
But you're right, and you think about someone like Keane, and I think at the time, I think it was the fact that I remember just seeing him thinking, I haven't seen anybody quite like that. I haven't seen someone with that arrogance or maybe it's not arrogance, that confidence, that kind of, I guess for neutrals, that sort of Rooney about him, didn't he? He was 17, he came on the scene and he was like, wow, this kid can play. And I think, we'd kind of gone through a few sort of partners with Bully, and obviously it was short-lived as it was for Keane, but for that time when he was in the team, he was just a joy to watch, wasn't he, Keane?
And I think maybe it feels nicer than it was at the time. And when you think about the partnership of Keane and Bull, I'd probably like to kid myself now that was, would have been one of the greatest partnerships of all time. But they actually didn't really play together that often and gel that much. We like to get a bit wound up about the FA Cup semi-final and neither of them getting a start. And I remember going, that was probably the first time. Obviously, had a few playoff semis and things like that in the mid to late 90s. But the FA Cup semi-final, being that close and going to Villa Park, and that was a real moment when I mean we could have won that day if we'd have gone at it properly. Poor old Steve Claridge.
It's one of those, and you're right. We have to mention it, and this is the thing with this series. We'll touch again on the highs in a moment, but you mentioned that semi-final, and I think it was so different to the recent semi-final, wasn't it, Sean? In terms of the recent one, I kind of accepted that because I kind of thought, well, okay, we were 2-0 up, but we're in a good place. I'm sure we're not going to be strangers to this stage, but I think it was because.
If you remember, I remember saying to this Alan, who I've mentioned already, God rest his soul. He was standing next to me, and when we went 2-0 up, I did after a few minutes after that, I sort of turned to him and was like, "Blimey, where do you think we should park next time?" We were there. We were in the final.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I'm not sure I can have I don't think I've quite got over that one yet.
I know what you're saying. I think it was just the fact with the comparison with the other one for me was we weren't at that stage that often, were we, in terms of that first game with Arsenal, and it was just a selection, as you say. You all turn up, you're excited, and you see, was it Robbie Slater and Claridge and you're looking at Bully and icon, and it's like this is his moment, and it's just like what? So
Think about that season though. What I really remember is not so much the semi. Actually, it was just the run to the final. I don't really have a photographic memory of many moments in my life, but I can still to this day remember standing behind the goal at Leeds when Don Goodman dinked the ball over the goalie, and I never saw the ball cross the line. Just everybody, it just going crazy in that moment, and that is easily a top 5, if not even top 2 or 3 moment of my time as a Wolves fan. Half the time as well around that time was queuing to get tickets, wasn't it? It was you could barely guarantee you'd get one unless you queued up overnight. The overnight queues is another one, actually. You're all getting used to that social distance queuing now. That I saw a picture the other day that reminded me of it must have been Norwich in a playoff semi-final, I think, and me and my mates got in the paper for getting tickets for that one. that was a proper full overnight queue job for that. But that's what, you sort of valued it a bit more then almost. For some reason, we really grafted to get the tickets from.
I think that's the thing. I was talking to a mate when we were trying to get tickets for that semi against Watford and the kind of the queuing system. And I had my missus was trying and his missus was trying and so forth. And he was like, "Why can't I just go? I just want to stand outside the ground and just queue all the way around." And it was like you've put your shift in to get your ticket rather than be a number. But yeah, it is what it is. I mean, we've touched on a few moments here, some highs and lows. What would you say? Because we'll end on the positive. So if we look at, say, perhaps as a low, mention a couple there. What would you say is your lowest moment as a Wolves fan? What was your moment where you thought, why am I doing this? Or you just didn't know where the team was going? Or was there a particular game that sort of added to your feeling at that time?
Yeah, I mean, there was general like upset and frustrations when we lost the lead to Albion when we were so far ahead, and that was more embarrassment, I think, than a particular low. There was heartache as a child. It was a bit different, losing the playoff semis and all those battles that we had with like Bolton and Palace, and thinking this was going to be the year, and it wasn't. But the real low, which came as an adult, was I was at the Brighton away game when we got relegated to League One, and the atmosphere in the crowd was horrible. I'd never experienced anything like that, where fans were so, like, not just having a go at players. We know that Wolves fans will soon enough have a go at players if they're not too keen on them. But this was more than that. It was really personal at the players. And I remember when Jamie O'Hara stood near the centre spot, and whether he stood with his foot on the ball or just stood with the ball still in front of him, and no player tackled him, and the Wolves fans were just booing him and laying into him, and I was definitely a part of that as well. Just the anger, that was horrible, and I still find it amazing that we had the season we had after that. That given that situation, I remember Roger Johnson. I wasn't that far from the front, and Roger Johnson coming over to try and either have a word with the fans or chuck his shirt in, and he could barely get near the crowd because of the vitriol at that point. And I do remember thinking, I can't do that. That's a bit too far for me to go eyeball to eyeball with somebody and actually scream at them. But yeah, that was horrendous. And when I think that was the Wolves fans' moment, when you see other teams who've struggled and gone down divisions and over the years. Yeah, if you were there at that the Brighton away, I think that stays with you a very long time, that feeling.
Yeah, and I think as you say, I guess, you touched on that sort of next season, and I think, and as you referenced there, we'd seen other clubs, have double relegations and also struggle to get back up. And like you say, to see that turnaround from what you saw in person, where you saw a club backs against the wall, that disharmony and that disconnection, that summer. And if you remember the following game, it was like that must have felt like a different club overnight, and it wasn't. And it took time to build that relationship. But I guess Kenny Jackett must take the praise for that. So.
Yeah, Kenny Jackett. And also, I think there's a few views that I think I have that, when you see Wolves fans on Twitter or you chat to people in the pub at the time with your mates, that I feel like I'm maybe not in line with the majority. And I know Jez Moxey and Steve Morgan have had get a lot of stick for the way that particularly the relegation was handled out of the Premier League, and then the managerial decisions, which obviously some of them were a bit of a joke in that season. But to actually keep your composure in that moment, in my job, I speak to tons of business people all the time, and you just and it's a very stressful situation. Then even if they're earning loads of money, you're not just sitting there having a cigar every night when the business is struggling. You've got staff, you're having to lay off people as you're getting relegated down the divisions, and still to have the composure to go, we're going to get somebody like Kenny Jackett in, and we're going to back him with the type of players that he wants. We're going to back him with the, even somebody as lovely as Kevin Doyle, who was effectively left out the squad for was it for all of that season? I think certainly for large part of it, just because we effectively can't afford you, and it's not where we want to go. I think I will always be quite impressed with that moment. But I've got a tendency with Wolves to look on the bright side of life a little bit, and always look on the better side of everybody, even those that probably don't deserve that.
No, and to that note, you mentioned the Millennium Stadium earlier as well, Sean. Is that your best moment, or was there another prior to that? Was there a moment when you thought, this doesn't get better, this is worth,
Ooh, that's a good one. I should have thought about this before. I think that I really try with my memories and my favourite players and all of that, not to just let the top 10 things be everything that's happened in the last few years under Nuno.
Well, yeah,
but I try and fight that a little bit, because of course, the last few years are going to be absolutely fantastic. Trying to think of moments. My first away game, one of my best ever memories, was Ipswich away in the FA Cup in, I think, 94, 95. I think it was maybe in the spring of 93, 94. We drew with them in the Cup, and then had a replay going away. And I must have been like 10 years old. I was in year 6 at primary school. Whatever it was called, the top year at primary school. And my teacher, Mr. Flanagan, who's still at St Anthony's now, he let me leave early in the afternoon, because the minivan that me and my mum and friends of the family were going down in, you can't get to Ipswich without having a bit of time off school. Yeah. It was all really exciting. Got down there. I don't think it was quite my first away game, but it's definitely the first one I remember. And then to go away with what I thought at the time, I didn't see the replay for about a week. It was a Tomo free kick in the top corner. I think Lee Mills maybe got the other one, and we won 2-1. And I got to in the van on the way home. They had a little mattress for me, because I had to go into school the next day. So they'd put a little mattress down, and I remember sleeping. We'd picked up a couple of fans on the way back, and all. And I was 10 years old, and that gave me a massive bug for seeing Wolves home and away, and just living. You're almost like irrelevant of the result. The experience of the match day was something that, definitely a big part of the travel club in the 90s with my mom, if my mom was going, and if not, with a few of my mates. So that one jumps out at me, and then I'm just sort of fast forwarding. I can fast forward through the 90s pretty quickly. Millennium Stadium was great. It was almost a bit too easy in a way for it to be one of those games. It wasn't a classic Wolves game, was it? It was
no
done and dusted. Then I remember the Leicester home game when we were 3-0 down at half time and won 4-3. That would be up there for celebrations. But then I'm crossing a lot of it. I'm being realistic. I think the Man United game was incredible. With Jota scoring the winner recently. The Kenny Miller game when Miller took that one away. That was nice, going into uni or school or whatever it was, and being able to stick it up a few United fans. But I think the United game, the City game. I was just going to say last season, but I've lost track of which.
I know we're on pause, but yeah, it's kind of we don't know where we're kind of picking up from, but yeah, the continuation of this season and last, and like you say, those wins against United in the cup as it's been this year, and Jota previously as well. But even going back to the Ipswich one, and that's what this series is about, really, because as you rightly say, we know, at the time of recording, we're just about to go back into this season, and we know for many generations, and we're absolutely respectful of the 50s and 60s and what went on before, but we know for many generations, this is absolutely brilliant. But everybody's got their own individual stories, and everybody's got their point in where I'm hooked. There's something about that, and there's something about an away game and a long journey, and like you say, going from school, that just stays with you, doesn't it? Really, it won't be in the memory books, but it'll be your own memories, and
Oh, there are times when me and mates legged it after school to get the travel club coach to go and see a god-awful game on a Tuesday night somewhere in the freezing cold in the middle of winter with only our blazer on because we hadn't really planned in the morning that we were going to go. Or, the away days have been a huge thing. And actually, I think what's been great about the last few years is they've really embraced and invested in the match day atmosphere at Molineux again, because in the late 90s it was pretty incredible with the Liquidator banging out, and that I think it was a playoff game, wasn't it, with Palace at home?
Yeah,
where we didn't quite do enough. And that the atmosphere then, I remember, and I remember for a lot of the 2000s thinking, this is great, but it wasn't what it was on a Wednesday night at Molineux. And I think they've got that back in the last few years, which has been brilliant. Just absolutely banging for a whole game.
I think that's it. And that Palace game, though, you're right. I remember, I think I was in the North Bank at the time, and that atmosphere, that night, that was something. I'm kind of getting goosebumps now thinking about it, because that was a special, special night, wasn't it? And like you say, we weren't far off, but there was something about that. And I think they've tried to replicate the atmosphere, and it's difficult. And I don't know what you think. It's probably maybe a misconception, but I think there's something to it. I think Wolves fans generally, sometimes you get the best atmosphere when the back's against the wall, when we've had a bad decision, where we're the underdogs. And sometimes what we found in those championship years, when the atmosphere wasn't quite there, was we were going out and expecting to win. So it's kind of different in these current times where there's an expectation with this team, but they've built up that momentum, and they've realised the one pack. They've done so much with that, and it just resonates. And it's such a great place to be, isn't it, Molineux, at the moment?
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting, all the one pack stuff, because I think when you've been going for as long as I've been going, you don't really need that. But what you realise is you do. The people who are they're not fly by night fans, but people who have been going more over more recent years, it's something for them to cling on to as well. And it does give people who maybe can't get to every game because we're selling out so much, you can feel like you're a part of something. I'm just I'm surprised and impressed at how well all that has worked. Quite interesting, really, with the change of leadership at the club a bit over the last year or so, with various directors and people leaving. If they're actually able to carry that on, I think that'll be a real test now. The stories. I wasn't at the Brentford game when Jeff Shee was buying around one of the pubs there. I was in the Hog's Head once when Laurie Dalrymple walked in, and he just happened to be standing next to me at the bar, and I got back to then. And those things really sort of spread like wildfire and give people a sense of being proud of the club for really sort of valid reasons. It doesn't feel like just a PR exercise. So they've got to keep that up. But yeah, I think at the minute, the way they're playing, they're not going to struggle for a bad atmosphere for a while.
No, and I think you feel it, don't you, in the town and in the city. Probably, if you like me, we call it the town still. But there's something about the football club, and do you find that every time you come back? Obviously, you come back, quite often. You say from Manchester, you find it when you're at the ground that there's just a feel in terms of, without putting your business head on too much, the economy and the feel for the ground, that the football club being successful, it just makes a difference to everybody's lives. It really just having a Premiership football club, being successful geographically where it's been in the city centre. It just, I don't know. It just has such a fantastic effect on people, I feel.
Yeah, I notice it because when I stay with my mum when I'm back in Wolverhampton, and my mum gets the bus everywhere, and I was brought up on buses, and you get on the bus, and you can almost just tell on match day as you get in the bus into town to go to in the 90s when I first went, it was the Feathers was always our pub before the match, and then it became the Style because I sort of fancied myself as a hotshot pool player as a teenager, so that sort of helped a little bit. But getting the bus into town, and it's the glint in the eye of the bus driver just going, who they're playing today, the interest, and I'm pretty sure there weren't many bus drivers asking that question when like Glenn Hoddle was in charge, and the people you sat next to on the bus on the way home afterwards, what was the score? How did they get? Oh, good. People you'd never think would be that fussed in the game, and you tell them the result, and they go, "Oh, good." And you're right. I think that feeling, it's the feeling. I don't know whether it really has a economic effect or not. I think bigger things at play with stuff like that, to be honest, and it's there's a danger that I think that a council can just go all in on a football club, when actually, people's lives and their livelihoods are much more than that. But whatever's going on in your lives, if Wolves are winning, that filters through, and you see it, and and you definitely notice it at the minute. And it feels to me like, as somebody who is now, unfortunately, I don't live in Wolverhampton, but I'm back there a lot. It feels like things are happening that. And hopefully everything that's going on, the crisis at the moment doesn't set things back too much. But when you see the train station pictures of the train station spruced up, and a fancy cocktail bar popping up here or there, and the pubs full on the good pubs full on a Saturday night, it's it gives you a bit of hope.
You just reminded me of the style, because I used to go there a lot with my dad. And there's something about that pub being where it is, and just walking down that alleyway, and I just got the old set up with the bar, the lounge, and the bowling green. What a great pub, and I think that's because of where the ground is as well. I get quite romantic about that, but it's a cracking pub. And hopefully, when it's safe to do so, we'll be going back. Obviously, perhaps not this season as we expect, but next season.
Actually, it's a good reason for a good shout out for the style, actually, because it's well set up for a bit of social distance. Yes. Drinking. You never mind the streets around it, but you've got the beer garden. They've got their fancy new, outdoor area at the back with the screens on there and everything like that. I remember the walk back down the alleyway. That was one of my sort of early memories as well. I'd be allowed to choose my chocolate bar. I think it used to have about 3 different corner shops where you could get get whatever you wanted from them along the way. And there was a pick and mix one if you fancied that. And they were great times. I'm not sure they're there anymore. There might be one corner shop left, I think, along the way.
Brilliant. Well, Sean, it's been brilliant really having a look back and sort of going through memory lane, and a lot of memories I know resonated with me and will resonate with a lot of people listening. Just before we close, thanks so much to everybody who's supporting the Fancast at the moment. If you like what we do, then please give us a 5-star review. We really do appreciate it. As I say, at time of recording, this will go out. The football's just about to get underway, so hopefully we'll be discussing many more memories in the future and good times as well. But for now, Sean, thanks so much for your time.
Can I just say before we wrap up as well?
Yeah.
All this chat about watching German football and Belarusian football and all that, I have absolutely no interest in that. I've got no interest watching any other sport behind closed doors on the telly. You need your own team back.
You do, and it's one of those people are kind of, you get all these. You've probably had them as well in groups. Pick your German team.
Not interested. I think I've humoured a few mates by saying, didn't Jadon Sancho play well or something like that? But it does make you realise that you just need to be back in that ground.
No, brilliant. Well, we're all looking forward to it, and we hope obviously everybody's listening is continued to stay safe and well, and we'll see you soon.